Hey, what's up, Redwood A Push? Mr. Vera and Mr. Eskridge coming at you guys with Chapter 9, Democracy in America. This chapter is going to cover the 1820s to about the 1840s and focus on one figure that is critical to the formation of the early republic, and that is, of course, the President Andrew Jackson Old Hickory. So without further ado, here is Mr. Eskridge.
All right, hey guys. So we're going to start this discussion today. We're really looking at kind of geographically what's happening as the United States is continuing to push westward. Ultimately, that'll end as once we get to the Pacific Ocean. But kind of the first thing that starts to arise as the Americans move out into the West during this time is the Missouri conflict. And so within Missouri, we start to see kind of the fracture of the United States and starting to fracture over these regional lines between the North and the South and the West. And really, the underlying issue is, will the institution of slavery be extended into these newly formed territories and what will become states of the United States? So really, the issue of slavery is going to, as you probably know from eighth grade, is going to lead to the Civil War. And so really we're starting to look at the backstory that leads to the Civil War. Okay, so during the 1830s, we have people going into Missouri, starting to settle in Missouri. And it's debated, was Missouri going to become a slave state where slavery was allowed and maybe promoted, or was it going to become a free state in which slavery would not be allowed? And there's a lot of conflict, not just in the state of Missouri, between pro-slavery and anti-slavery, but also in the halls of Congress as well, and in the presidency. And so what we start to see, or what we see develop, is the first compromise. And we're going to see a series of these compromises and acts that go through Congress, are signed by the president, that are going to kind of be band-aids in holding the Union together. And the Missouri Compromise is the first one. So as Missouri applied for statehood, there's division: should it be a slave state or a free state? And we have some really ingenious kind of tactical moves going on in Congress. And what ultimately is arrived at is the Missouri Compromise of 1820. And it's three parts, as it talks about in the reading. The first one is that Missouri is going to be admitted as a slave state, and then Maine will be admitted as a free state. So maintaining that balance of representation and the number of states that are free and those that are slave. And then what it really did, and pay attention and remember this this line of latitude, the 3630. So 3630 is going to be a rallying cry that we're going to hear leading up to the Civil War. And basically what that says is that at that line of latitude, any territories that would be carved out, or future states out of the Louisiana Purchase, would north of that line would be free automatically, and then south of that line slavery would be allowed and permitted. So although the issue of slavery was not completely dealt with, it was kind of pushed to the wayside. And we're going to see a number of these compromises happen, and really they're like a safety valve or a pressure valve in this kind of boiling cauldron of the issue of slavery between the North and the South in the United States. So here we just have a map that shows that 3630 line, and as you can see, it's kind of neatly extends kind of from the south and the north westward. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Vieira, who's going to talk about kind of our protagonist, antagonist, hero of this chapter, or anti-hero, Andrew Jackson.
All right, so here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, the villain, the hero, the everything. So Andrew Jackson, probably the only thing you know about him is he's on the $20 bill for now. But he is arguably one of the most consequential presidents in the history of the country, and probably next to, of course, Abraham Lincoln, the most influential American of the 19th century. Andrew Jackson was sort of the first celebrity turned president. He was a man that came from humble beginnings. He was not wealthy. He was not born into wealth anyway. He does acquire a huge amount of it. But he was born in a log cabin. He represents the plain folk, the frontier folk, and he was a war hero. So he really rises to prominence through pulling himself up by his own bootstraps, as the old American cliche goes, and really becoming a hero of the common man. And he is going to usher in an era of mass democracy that the country really had never seen before. But before he is able to do that, he pretty much is done dirty by two politicians of the time period, and that takes place in the corrupt bargain. In 1824, the presidential election was too close to call. A no winner got a majority of the electoral votes. What happens constitutionally? It says that if there is no one that is a clear outright winner, the House of Representatives will get to decide. And so in the House of Representatives, the 1824 election goes towards John Quincy Adams. Now, Jackson is going to call this a corrupt bargain. And the reason he calls it a corrupt bargain is because another candidate at the time, who was Henry Clay, was very influential in Congress, and he is able to sway votes away from Andrew Jackson towards John Quincy Adams. And in return, Clay is made Secretary of State, which is, of course, next to Vice President, the best job that you can get from the President of the United States. So Jackson really feels cheated and kind of swears revenge on John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay. With John Quincy Adams' presidency, it's not really one that is all that relevant. He's a minority president, and the fact that he doesn't have the popular vote behind him, so he's never really that popular of an American president. And in 1828, Andrew Jackson will storm back, and in a very dirty election in which personal insults were flung back and forth, and even at each other's significant others, Andrew Jackson will become the president of the United States. And if you look at the maps of the Electoral College, you can see right in this area on the map using the mouse that the popular vote, Andrew Jackson actually won it. He won it by quite a few percentage points. He got 43% of the popular vote. Now, that's not a majority, but it is a plurality. And that means that most Americans that voted wanted him to be president of the United States. Because he only gets 38% of the electoral vote, he is not declared winner. That's the way that the Constitution is written up. You have to get over 50% of the vote. So when the House of Representatives votes, this is the result. And you can see John Quincy Adams goes from getting 32% of the electoral votes to 54% of the votes cast in the House of Representatives. So this is going to set in motion Andrew Jackson's basically revenge tour. And when he is elected president in 1828, he is going to mold and shape the presidency and, in that case, the country to kind of do his bidding and carry out his programs and see through that his vision of the country is really the one that is going to be the legacy. So here is Mr. Eskridge again, and we're going to get a little dig a little deeper into Jackson's presidency.
All right, guys. All right. So as Mr. Villa said, after Jackson was defeated, then he roars back and ends up taking the White House. And for his supporters, what they really see it as is that it's kind of this new era in which the voice of the people, the voice of the public is being heard. And especially Jackson coming from the West, he has a lot of supporters in the West, like kind of these like frontiers folks. And what they see Jackson's victory as kind of getting rid of the old aristocracy that had really been a big facet of American government, especially under John Quincy Adams. And just kind of a little fun fact: after Jackson gave his inaugural address, there's hundreds of supporters of his, and they stormed into the White House where the tables were set up with cake and ice cream and punch and all these things, and it was just like kind of this mob party. And Jackson was really ushered out of the White House for fear that something might happen to him. But this really shows that the power of the people and ordinary people, i.e. ordinary white men that owned some land or did not own land felt that they had achieved a victory under Jackson. And so one of the things that Jackson does is he promises to get rid of the elite, the political elite that had been in Washington for so long. And so what he does is he essentially says, I'm going to get rid of these people, and they may have been qualified, they may not have been qualified, but that they were people that had experience in office, and therefore he wanted some new blood in there. And so what he ends up enacting is what's called the spoil system, and basically he says, to the winner goes the spoils. And so what he does, he appoints numerous people to different cabinet positions and different government positions that may have been qualified, again, may not have been qualified, but really he sets up this idea that political office can be won based on political favors, and we're going to see that continue to